I just wanted to introduce myself first, or maybe introduce this panel, because we're perhaps officially the panel with the coolest shoes. If you can't see, check it. Everybody's got some good shoes on. So that's the first thing. But no, what we're going to do is we'll introduce ourselves and talk about one app that we opened this morning.
Yeah.
I'll start. I'm from inMobi, and Louisa might like it. I opened Bumble today. No, I'm just kidding. Not really. I mean, I'm from San Francisco. I came here and I'm like, oh, let's look what's going on here in the dating scene. No, not really. I opened the weather app because it's pretty shitty. I didn't expect it. But it's great. I'll hand it over to Todd to introduce himself and talk more about one app that he opened.
Absolutely. My name is Todd Kane, the VP of Growth at a children's ed tech company called Begin. We oversee about 4 to 5 different businesses: Homer, CodeSpark, Little Passports, KidPass, that all serve children really through the ages of 0 to 12 through educational products, either in-app or physical box subscription. And my first app I actually opened today was ChatGPT, which for me is my go-to app when it's 8 o'clock in the morning and I'm not really trying to write a fully fleshed out email. It makes me sound super professional until people start realizing that no way do I start an email by saying, hope you're doing well. So if anyone gets that email from me today, sorry.
It's like hope this email finds you
well. Yes.
Finds you in a well.
Yes.
Either ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, are you alone?
Hey guys, I'm Alon. I am the VP of Marketing at Smoothe. Smoothe is a spa services on-demand app, dual-sided marketplace. So we offer massages, facials, haircuts. You could get one today. After this, you might need them from the chairs we're sitting on. Everyone gets a discount. Just come find me. But seriously, we deliver massages and facials to people's hotel rooms, homes. We have a client-side app and a provider-side app. So there's a lot of interesting things that come into play with that, and it's different for every market, and pricing different in every market. So lots to chat about if you want to know more. And then in terms of the app I opened today, Wordle, I'm addicted, which is probably not a bad thing. It makes me think in the morning. Did anyone get today's Wordle? Anyone? Really? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Person. I did not. I screwed up. Yeah, I was really pissed about today. So if you haven't, go Wordle while we're talking if you're bored.
All right. Well, that was fantastic. So let's get into the some questions, some interesting discussion here. We're not going to talk about ATT or scan. Fine. It's okay. Will not. First, I think the first thing is, first to you, Todd, how has the consumer behavior changed over the last 1, 2, or 3 years, especially after pandemic? What do you see, especially from your lens? And how do you utilize that information in your day-to-day?
Yeah, absolutely. So being in the children's category, there's a lot of factors I think are important for this room to be aware of. During COVID, a very omnipresent kind of at-home learning value that our product and service really provided parents and kids during the lockdown. But during that same time, there were implications of COPPA and regulations inside the app that really made us rethink how much of our business, which at the time, let's say, was 95% mobile app UA and 98% of that was on iOS, of really where we can expand that and not really depend on or rely on the implications of privacy-first regulations that might impact how we can grow and scale. So for us, it was really meeting the customer where they were at, and we knew that there is a huge customer base in the mobile app side of the house, and we're going to continue to serve them there. But we also knew there was a lot of different customers that also would want to purchase on web for our product, and that was really one of the bigger things that we focused on the first 12 months coming out of COVID within 2021, of how do we really move our business and find how we can really find those customers who are really wanting to shop on web, not buy on app, and convert them inside a web funnel, which for us was really impactful. We were able to grow new channels that were not part of our normal UA mobile first marketing mix. We were able to improve our margins because we weren't having to pay the 30% Apple tax, which is super important. And third, really scale and kind of find a new place for our customers and meet them where they're at. So really for us, it was how do we continue to find these customers in new, unique places and really show up for them in a predominant way? And 2, how do we continue to understand the evolution and changing within the privacy first marketplace that exists in kind of UA and really adapt and react to that? And really it's been a real cross-functional partnership, not only with just the traditional growth teams and paid UA, with our CRM team on the web, and now we're acquiring leads and being able to sell to them. With our creative team, we're going to talk about that, about really developing creative and using that as a conversion tool for us and a marketing tool for us more than like hyper targeting, et cetera. So it was really a large kind of portfolio focus of how do we evolve our marketing mix to really challenge ourselves and also meet our customers where they're at.
Awesome. So would you say, what's your split at this point in terms of web and mobile? You said when you started it was 98, I guess?
Yeah, I'd say it was like 98% UA mobile app. And nowadays we're probably around 50-50, which is amazing in terms of just the evolution of what we've been able to do.
Awesome. That's fantastic. How about you, Alon?
In terms of consumer? Or what?
Yeah, as consumer, and how have you used that information?
I mean, more than anything, it's personalization. You probably hear that all the time. We're hit over our head with personalization, but it really is finding the right person for the right thing at the right time. Especially with us, for so many different services, there's so many different types of people. So you could get a 90-minute Swedish, a 60-minute deep tissue. You could get, a hydrating facial. How do you find what you're serving to what person and when they need it or want it? The facial consumer is very different than the massage consumer in some ways. In some ways, they're exactly the same. You're not going to get a facial every week. You might get a massage every week. So really understanding that, giving them the right content, meeting them where they're at, and really more than anything, adding the value to them. People have no patience now, especially post-pandemic, if we could even say that. I still think we're in one, but that's a whole separate conversation. But the post-pandemic world is everyone just wants things now, fast, and value add. If you can't grab their attention, you're losing. You need to keep it simple, stupid. You don't want to oversell. And I also found, interestingly, another interesting consumer behavior is before I joined my company, they really believed in driving people to a landing page on web and then to get to the web to app and then driving them into actually a point of purchase. But I don't think that's necessary for everything you're selling. You're actually adding a step to your funnel. For what? I mean, if someone's searching at-home massage, I think they know what an at-home massage is. I think that's what they're looking for. So you need to just get them to purchase right away and not sell them on what is a massage or, oh, it's going to help you relax. They know that. They're looking for that already. Obviously, if you're a SaaS company or you have something that is hard to explain, you might need to sell in that way. But I found that we are much more efficient and effective when we do that. And also, the last thing about WebTap I'll say is we drive people to web because people are doing a lot of search on Google, for example, massage, at-home services, spa services, whatever. When they get to the website, they can still book, but then we will tell them, okay, now go into the app to track your massage. Your provider is on their way. So it's more of a seamless experience. There's a reason, and again, the value add to them. If you tell someone to do something, but there's no value add, they're not going to do it. They're actually going to get really frustrated and leave, which most of you should probably know by now anyway.
That makes sense. So I think for you, the biggest takeaway would be to bringing them what they really want, what they're really looking for, and reducing the friction in the path to get them there.
Yeah, and also telling them why it's better, right? Right. I could go get a massage anywhere here in New York. Why would I want it at home? What is it giving me that isn't? Is it privacy? Is it picking my provider? Is it within the hour? Making sure you're touching on why the consumer would even go for something like this in the first place.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm starting to read some of these questions, and I think this is a really good segue. One of the questions is around what is the impact of brand on user acquisition, and I think that's a really good segue. Maybe we can start with you, Alon, is how do you see, and this is a really old debate, right? Brand versus performance. There are companies like Airbnb that have come out and said and claimed pretty, thumping their chest, claimed pretty aggressively that branding works and performance doesn't, or whatever that is. There are different stages that companies are in, right? And there are a lot of external factors. But overall, from your lens, how do you see brand versus performance work for your use case and in general in the industry?
So it really depends on your company and what you're selling. I think brand is number one for B2C. It's super important. And where I work currently, we don't have a brand budget, actually. We are very focused on bottom line and driving profitability and efficiency. Challenging for me, but a good challenge. So how do I bring brand into performance is really what I have to think about every day, and all my creative is very brand focused. Meaning I'm not just trying to drive the action, I'm trying to get you to understand what the experience is before. So think for our product that we're selling, it's very zoomed in, like hands on lower back, skin on skin, oils, to really make you feel what the experience is. And that is the brand experience. And that will then also drive performance. So there is a way to hack it, right? That is the experience you're going to get through Smoothe, through our creative, with our branded creative that is really driving performance. We are not necessarily doing things where you want people to just learn about the brand, going out and doing PR, working on really building who we are in the market right now, because we just don't have the funds for that. But that's okay. If we truly give on that experience to our customers, word of mouth will help build the brand organically for us. And that's really what we're hoping to do. So yeah, I hope that answers that.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about you, Todd? And I'll give my one-liner on this.
Awesome. So, first of all, great job. I would absolutely sign up for the massage app today. So
yeah, go do it right now.
So
I don't know why you haven't yet.
Yeah, that's just a lot of eyeballs on me right now.
Yeah.
Pressure. No, I mean, for our business, we're an early education product, right? We're a service, not necessarily a product for product's sake. We're not selling a vacuum. So education is so important, especially for parents who are having a challenge thinking about truly how does education fit to them before their kid starts formal education. There's a scare factor. So we're really trying to be thoughtful from just a positioning standpoint of how we really enter the market and talk about ourselves. That being said, very similarly, there's not this escrow brand budget that exists for me to run massive reach campaigns on TV, but we are thinking critically about how we really affect that full funnel and that full 360. That can be done and looked at in a variety of different ways that aren't necessarily air quotes traditional brand, but like very thoughtful to how you talk about the brand. Like truly, what is that user journey from the time they see an ad and come to the website, they get it, sign up for an email list, and their head of CRM sends them these amazing emails that really educates them about the product and the service we're trying to bring. How do we really leverage the thought leadership that exists within our organization? We have some phenomenal doctorates that really drive our educational profile of our business. And how do we really leverage that to tell the story and narrative? So it's a level of infusing brand narrative and brand storytelling into these elements that make sense, not necessarily a traditional, we're going to run a brand campaign for brand campaign's sake, but everything that we do has a touch point of brand, no matter if we're looking at it from a down and dirty Facebook DR ad that we're pushing people to our website or an Apple search ad down to what's coming through our website. There's every element that's really imposed by brand and telling that narrative in a thoughtful and elevated way.
I also just want to say really quick about brand. It's what are you really trying to do, right? Like if you're building all these brand campaigns, but your product isn't ready or your service or what you're offering isn't right, it's a huge waste. You have to do it at the right time. And I think people don't always understand. That's why you see the big players doing that. I mean, yes, it's a strategy for someone like Airbnb to start the way they did with brand, and it worked for them, but they also had a kick-ass product and they had a kick-ass idea. Most people don't.
And they started in 2020.
Right.
After years.
Yeah.
And that was one way of them explaining why they cut marketing budgets or why they did big cuts, right? It makes sense. I think there's a different stages that different companies are in, and that's how it works. The way I personally see it is brand is a delayed performance. Mm-hmm. Whatever you do, you're building a brand to eventually drive people, because what is performance? It's always driving people to take certain action and purchase your thing, right? It's delayed performance. And then that kind of answers one of the questions that Peggy had here, right? That's around how does brand impact UA? And I think a lot of that stuff happens over the period. Okay, so I think moving on to a different conversation, which is around, you guys talked about the users and bringing them what they want and all these kinds of, delightful creative delivery that helps not only drive users to take certain actions, but also leaves them remembering about your brand, right? How do you target those users? How do you figure out who to go after, in what way, or how do you creatively target the users, especially in the privacy-safe environment?
Yeah, it's a great comment, great question. So there's no kind of question mark in my mind as the Googles of the world and the Facebooks of the world really move away from this really personalized, hyper-targeted world. I mean, when you look at Performance Max or Advantage Plus on Facebook, the campaigns are moving more and more away from like the marketer really driving and pulling the levers and hyper-targeting. The element in my perspective that a marketer really has is really leveraging the creative to tell the story, but also really isolate who the different users you're trying to communicate to, and you run those as tests and experiments. And ultimately, the creative is what's doing so much of the work these days. And it's happening more and more as we're just seeing this kind of evolution evolve over the last even 12 months, 6 months of creative first kind of targeting. And I think for us, the creative evolution has really been that focus of how do we use creative, partner with our internal creative team, and really create a flywheel between performance and creative to understand what's working, what's not working, what elements can we play with, and how do we take big swings at creative, really challenge ourselves to say, where can we go outside of our normal bounds to understand how are these touching and communicating to different parents. For our physical box subscription business, it's heavily gifted in Q4 for grandparents, which is a much different message in the creative than in non-Q4. We're really talking to parents and they're providing them for their child themselves. So there's just all these elements within the creative nuance that is really our sandbox for experimentation.
That makes sense. How about you, Alon?
I love this because in 2019, everyone was obsessed with hyper-targeting. Yeah. It was like, I want to find the mom with the red hair in Chicago who has 3 kids. I don't want to find that person anymore. I don't want to pay for that. So you're right, it is all about the creative. I've worked at a few other app companies that had this issue of how do we find these people. I worked at a breast cancer app out previously. And how do you find someone who has breast cancer online? How do you target them? Tell them download this because you have breast cancer or you might have breast cancer. That's really tough. And the way we got to it is the root of what you're solving for. Why would anyone who has breast cancer even think about downloading this app? And what is it going to solve for them? So what was most effective was in our creative. It was a quote that said, this app gave me information my doctor missed about breast cancer. And that struck a chord. Why would you ever click on that or engage with that if you don't have breast cancer? It as showing you that there is a value here that you are missing somewhere else. And that creative, the reason I mentioned that, doesn't have to be visual. It can just be a quote. It can really just get to the root of what you're solving. So there's a lot of ways to skin the creative, to skin this cat, so to speak. But yeah, I think creative is number one. If you're not doing that, you're losing.
So what I'm hearing is from both of you, creative is perhaps one of the biggest tools that you have to target the users in the right way, bring the right message to the right people. So going further deep into creative, how do you look at A/B testing in a real way? What is real A/B testing? Is it just changing the colors? Oh, blue versus red, AB, or blue, red, yellow, white, A, B, C, D, whatever, or changing the buttons or all those things? Or like, how do you view a full-fledged, solid experiment design, execution, and the analysis of an A/B test?
Yeah, I'll start with that.
Yeah.
Again, depends what you're solving for. I hate the let's change the button to orange and run and test for 2 weeks. If you are at that point in your business, congratulations, you are doing amazing work if that is where you're at to move the needle at that point. Most of us, I would argue, none of us are there, probably in this room. So you want to take a few swings at overall control versus where you want to be. That means you might change a few things in your booking flow, for example, all at once and say, we know that they need visuals here. We actually did this recently. We need visuals here. We're going to change where pricing is and we're going to change where sign up registration happens. And yeah, those are a lot of changes. We're still going to measure every single screen and see the drop off. But overall, we're going to see, did our control do well versus our test? And we're going to run it for a set period of time. And if it does great, cool. We're turning that on and we're going to kill the control. And that to me is a true A/B test in today's world. None of us have time to just sit and wait weeks for tests to perform while not doing other tests, while not being impacted by seasonality. There's too much going on. There's too much noise for those really small tests to be effective anymore, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to ask a follow-up. Like, how frequently do you do these? Is it more, oh, I have 2 themes right now, I'm going to look at that for a week and turn this on, turn this off, or you continuously do it?
It really depends on what we're trying to achieve in that quarter. For us, first-time bookings is number one. Getting the most bookers through the door and requesting an appointment is really the number one thing. So if whatever level we can pull, we'll do that. And that can mean we're doing 5 tests in one quarter, or we're not doing any. So it really varies. There's no like set way we're doing it. I have looked at companies that all we did was A/B tests, 51 A/B tests. I'm not going to mention the company in 1 year, and did it really methodical like that. You know how many were effective? 0. Not one needle enough for us to make.
You're boiling the ocean then.
Yeah, it's just insane.
Yeah.
So.
Interesting. I heard you say something about KPIs and what matters to you. We'll get back to that in a bit. How about you on an A/B test?
Yeah, so for us, especially in the lens of creative, where that is really our heartbeat of what we're learning every single week. From how we executed, we found that Facebook's like if you're looking at Facebook as an example, their A/B testing tool is not necessarily designed for marketers because ultimately it's going to allow both creative to spend. You're running the two experiments, but you're burning a lot of cash on a really bad creative. And we're also hurting the business because we don't have a necessary isolated test budget to experiment. So we found within Facebook's platform, really smart on figuring out what the top performing creative is and serving that creative more than the creative that isn't performing well, serving that less. So we use that as a more of a flywheel mechanism for us to throw creative in and really see what's resonating. Underneath, we're looking at all the key metrics like click-through rate, cost per session, how long people are viewing, experimenting really within that first 3 to 5 seconds of every single ad to see what we can do to get them over that hump to click the ad, experimenting with different types of ads themselves. Is it more UGC, and what type of UGC is really resonating for us? If we're designing our own ads in-house, like what elements are really sticky? And for that, the frequency of that is almost effervescent, 365 days a year. Our creative team doesn't have unlimited firepower for us to produce unlimited assets, but at the same point, every couple of weeks, almost every week, we're having a new batch of creative based on kind of the learnings to throw into the mix to understand what's happening. And that's, there's evergreen moments, there's tenfold moments, there's offers and promotions. So there's so much learning happening underneath the hood that just happens at such a speed right now that it's less about let's set these two creatives against each other for 2 weeks, see what works, and then come back and talk about it, and then design some more ads and some more experiments. Because by then you've lost a lot of time, and time is pretty precious these days in terms of performance. And 2, the just experimentation flywheel that you're trying to create just takes too long. You actually haven't moved the needle in terms of actually helping and driving the business.
I actually want to touch on that real fast because you mentioned it on Facebook. On Google, we were trying to run creative to find out if we say 20% off or actually say like $40 off your first massage, which one works better. I don't think Google, I'm not sure about Facebook. We didn't do it there, but we were doing it because we spend more on Google. But on Google, I didn't find that I could actually run that test properly because Google will perform what I found. The algorithm will get me the conversions, and some of the creative will never even get the point to learn or be tested. It will just go for what performs. And it does not mean, so for example, if the 20% off did better on Google, that does not mean that that will do better for us in our CRM, for example. So it was really tricky because going back to like our board would ask questions about be like, run this test. I'm like, I can't really run that test. Google doesn't work like that. Google works to get you the conversions. That's it. And I struggled with that actually when I was running those experiments last year.
Yeah, and it's also probably pretty tough if your board's asking you about running A/B tests. That's a whole other challenge. We've actually, So I mean, tough room. We've actually learned a lot actually from CRM, mostly because the exposure will be there. So our CRM lead, he's actually here today in the front. Hi, Armin. Is able to run these experiments at high fidelity and learn quickly in terms of what we're seeing. So similar to that, we ran an experiment. It was 3 months for free versus % off versus $1 off. And they saw a ton of great insights on the CRM side that actually showed promise off those 3 months off. And it just happened to be what, in this world, the example Facebook optimized for it really started to convert. So there are some learnings in terms of just what does get true exposure across as like all eyeballs, because in the world of Facebook and Google, all eyeballs aren't treated the same, and they are optimizing for that conversion value. So it's just, again, I think it's a little bit about the mobility and kind of the conversation across teams, and how do we really support each other and learn from what others are seeing to implement in terms of different metrics that we're running against.
That makes sense. This could go 2 ways. One is, what channels do you prefer? What channels do you run on? Do you run the same test on multiple channels at the same time, and that's how you run that stuff on the back end just to look at the metrics? Or just go over to the metrics side where we talk about the KPIs, right? So whatever works better for you guys, I'll let you guys pick one of the topics around. Do you want to talk more about channels? Do you want to talk more about KPIs?
Let's start with KPIs, and if the room's interested, we can...
The room's interested in something else as well, which I do after that.
The upvoting is
really
like 5. Yeah.
5 upvotes, yeah.
Well, if it gets to 10, we'll answer it, right?
Yeah, and this was good.
Oh, look at you getting people in there.
Oh my God, this is great.
That is the president of the
questions.
People wanted.
Yeah. So for us, in terms of the metrics, when we're looking at this, and like there's different metrics across different like platforms. But if we're talking about like our web-based acquisition funnel and things like Facebook and Google, you know, we're really looking to see what can we improve in terms of on-platform metrics, which are generally click-through rate and cost per session, like how much efficiently we're bringing people to the site, but also how is that traffic converting once they get there? Because in some examples, we might improve click-through rate and cost per session, and the cost is getting really efficient to get people to the site, but the message just didn't resonate well. Like we're getting, you know, for lack of better words, a little more clickbaity, and folks are clicking through, but ultimately that conversion isn't coming through the pipeline. So it's a balance between the two of those elements for us to really understand what is driving the purpose of people coming to the site, but then also what's actually driving the site to convert at the same level of the same conversion. So it's a little bit of both that we're looking at across the board. And at one point we were really bullish on the idea that click-through rate and cost per session were like the key top of funnel metrics we should obsess on to try to improve kind of some of the experimentation we're doing in ad creative, but found that that's not always, it's a leading indicator, but sometimes it's a little bit of a vanity metric, because there's things like UGC for us that doesn't necessarily always have the best click-through rate for us on ads, but has phenomenal conversion rates just in terms of the authenticity that people are coming through these influencers and converting. So it's a little bit of a hybrid of both for us that we look at and examine across the board.
So it's more about how do you bring people and what happens after they get there.
Yes.
So if I were to put this in a song, if the milkshake brings boys to the yard, but the yard's messy, there's a problem.
I love a good Khalees reference, so great.
Wow. So if the yard's messy, they're not going to come back again, right? Maybe. I'm just kidding.
I can't believe we're talking about Khalees right now. It's a throwback. I actually, I want to jump into that question if I can.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, so balancing the educating the user on an app without overwhelming them with information. Okay, so there's a few things there for me. One is your product needs to do the job first. So the number one thing that the person downloaded for, what's the story you're telling? What was the ad that even drove them in? If, again, talking about us, if it's, you know, get relaxed with a Swedish massage, get soothed, whatever, that needs to be front and center within the product right away. They need to understand how to book a massage. They need to understand how much it costs, what you're offering, and that journey needs to be crystal clear. If someone is downloading your app and doesn't know what to do, it's a product problem. That's not a user acquisition problem. So that's what I would say with that. And then in terms of how you can support product when that happens, because that is a lot of our jobs, unfortunately, because that happens way too frequently. I've been there. Is what is the most valuable thing your user should be doing? So again, for us, it's booking that first massage and exploring our services. So we can say, you know, welcome to Smoothe. Here's our top 3 like most loved services this month. Like, check it out, what users are saying, get them excited, get them a reason to go and engage and deep link into that section of the product so they can explore that one chunk at a time. I'm a big believer in not sending an email with like 18 things to do. I really love a one call to action focused email. I at least from what I've seen from a performance standpoint, that is key. I understand with content, it's a whole different ball game, and you might have a lot of different things in there, and there might be long form email, which also has its place. But for action, you really need to keep it simple, stupid, get to the point, and one thing at a time in order. And then back to the personalization thing I said earlier, go in that order for what they are or not doing. You shouldn't just blanketly continue emailing people the same thing. If they didn't respond to that, stop emailing that, try something else. And a lot of marketers are just, they automate something. It's like day 2, they do this, day 4, they do this, regardless of what happens. And that's a huge problem. So that's how you can support product in that way when they're not able to deliver what you need to get the user to do what you need them to do.
Oh, makes sense. Do you want to take that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have quite the on our side. We look at a little bit more of how growth and product are working together, because our business is really not an install business at all. We're a trial start business, and normally is a 30-day trial. So getting them to actually start that trial and put that credit card down is super important to us. Ultimately, if that doesn't happen, like I don't have the luxury of saying it's as much of it's really it's a business problem that we're trying to solve. And I think it's the balance of where is the right value that you're putting in within the ad to get the person excited. Again, we're an early education children's product, reading, math, SEL, coding, whatever that might be. And then once they get inside the app, they're obviously right there and they're super excited, but they're still confused. They're still concerned, like, where does my journey start? And that's where I think we've learned a lot about quizzes and surveys that we're able to really provide that parent during that journey. Because ultimately for our product, the purchaser and the user are two different people. The parent is handing that product to their child afterwards to start that journey, and potentially they're sitting there side by side with them and really exploring this educational journey together. But many times it's a parent providing it to the child themselves. So getting that parent, that validation that we're providing the child and meeting them where they're at in terms of the right kind of age and stage and services that we're really providing them within the app, and getting them to feel as though, hey, we're really this, your child is, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have the right products, and we're able to really show the value that these products provide children in terms of reading, math, SEL scores over time. Sets that parent up to feel that they're going to have success, and then handing that product off to their child and putting their credit card down becomes a no-brainer.
You're saying something that I think everyone here has probably seen. Stamp of approval is really important. A quote, 4 stars, reviews, it just validates it. They don't care no one trusts the brand speaking, they trust other people speaking. So anytime you can infuse that, you should do that.
That's a good point. And there's a question about how do you integrate your use cases into a campaign? What you talked about is using reviews in your campaign creative strategy. Maybe think about use cases as well, right? Like, this is really common in gaming, where they take you through the whole, gamify the creatives, playables and stuff, which gives you a feel of what you're going to expect in the app. Do you use some of that stuff, not the app or maybe just the platform itself, right? Do you use any of that in your creative strategies around what to expect when I get there, even when you're trying to acquire them?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest moments for us, and this is actually before I even started at the company, was the business double downing and paying for a pretty big research on how much our product actually increases reading over X period of time. The statistics somewhere around, like, this child needs to use over X period of time to increase their reading scores by 74%. That itself was like the single biggest jump in terms of validation for us to show that, hey, this isn't just some product that could help your child. This is proven that X hours a day over X period of time, this will happen. And that alone, I think, is a good example of just a validation of trust that's important in terms of the relationship that we have with the customer.
That actually, it's not so much use cases, but I almost see it as your selling points in a way are really important for marketer. Like, I worked at a calorie counting app at one point, and said users who use this app who subscribe are 2 times more likely to lose weight and reach their goal than those who don't. That was like the number one selling point. So getting that stuff is really critical. It's kind of what you're talking about. Like, for us, it's this, 10 years in business, largest network of providers for spa services on demand. Anything like that, I think we try to integrate in there to, I guess it's kind of a use case, but it's more like your selling points and your way of proving yourself that you're valid and legit.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And now, come to think of it, do you also, because you have a 2-sided marketplace, right? Where do you also utilize some of your inventory or supply or whatever, the service providers in your creative strategy or in your UA strategy in some way?
Great question. We do at times, and we don't as well. It's very touchy because those people don't work for our company. They're contractors, 1099s essentially. So we have to be very careful with what we can and can't do with their images. And also, a lot of them, for them, they use us for a very different reason than the clients do. They come to us because it gives them freedom. It gives them flexibility. It gives them the opportunity to know that we got their back if something has happened. From an insurance standpoint, we're driving business for them. So all of those it literally is like working at 2 completely separate companies, honestly, when you think about how you're trying to please them versus how you're trying to please the client. And we also have to be very careful about what our creatives look like, because we want to make sure that the providers feel safe and secure with what we're putting out there, and making sure that they're like, if they see the ads, like, oh yeah, that Smoothe is representing us in a right way, and that they're not we're not being profiled. As you can imagine, it's a very complex, being in the spa industry is a very complex business.
Sorry, I was getting a call, I guess. Sorry. That makes total sense. I think the reason I asked that is because in a lot of cases we have seen like platforms, real money platforms like Skills, who provide platforms to other developers to build things on their platform, right? And then they're using those things to market and could use that strategy into the UA to get a lot more people to come and use the skills platform in general, right? So it's kind of a good way, not a clickbait, but it's a good way to bring people in.
Yeah.
But you have to be very, your point is really, in your case, it's a little different in that you have to be very careful about it.
It's interesting because also I've worked at a dating app, and I say people who work at dating apps are in the business of selling people in a way.
Yeah.
Because that's why people would use your app. Like, well, do you use this for this type of person? Use that for the type of person. Well, I want to be very careful of selling people. We're selling services. We're not selling the people's faces. I think that's really important.
Yeah, because sometimes you have a really, someone looks at a photo and like, oh, am I gonna get this person for my service? And they find someone else and they're like, no, I don't like it.
And it's about the quality of the service. It's not about what the person looks like, and it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
We have to be very careful about that.
Yeah. Okay. So your main messaging is always about value prop.
Yes.
Awesome. That makes sense. All right. One last thing. I see one question here that says, what is the single most effective strategy you have found at your company that overcomes a user's hesitancy to download yet another app? I mean, you kind of found that way. You may move from app to web.
Yes.
So commented that some way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's still, and there's a lot of the, for a parent, there's information overload. And a lot of them are here today, a lot of competitors within the space that we're offering, right? And each of them has a different value. And I think it's, how do we remain authentic to our mission? All of us are trying to really help parents in some sort of way. But ultimately, where do we meet these customers where they're at? And to your point, like, you don't have as much disruption downloading and overflow of alternative apps when you're downloading or purchasing on the website. So that's another good execution of that.
Makes sense. Well,
I mean, if your user is not interested in downloading your app, they're not your user, is my first answer. And if they don't think they should download your app, then maybe you shouldn't be an app. Not everything needs to be an app. So I find that question interesting because it's your job to add the value again and make sure that it's clear what your app is for. I think that most people will download an app if they see the value add and it's solving something for them. And if it's not, that's a problem. And I don't underestimate the value of the App Store cards. That's really where you're selling at that point. They have to look cool. I mean, depending on your brand, but like we've seen huge lift by just upgrading them and not making them look generic and boring. Like the more they pop, the more they feel interesting. The video is super critical too. We don't have as much like metrics on that information because of Apple. But what we do know is that it does impact. That's your last point of sell. So you really need to tell a story there.
That makes sense. So I think the single most effective strategy would be to diversify out of app into a web, maybe. That's one way to look at it.
Sure.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we're almost there. Just a minute. So do you have any closing comments around what should the fellow marketers do in terms of start, stop, continue situation? Like, can you give really quick final words?
Yeah, that's a big, Phil, that's a big question. I mean, the biggest statement I would give is continue to experiment, continue to be bold, continue to really push the envelope, challenge what's old, because what's old is new, what's new is old. And if something didn't work 6 months ago, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to work now. The world is challenging. The mobile app advertising ecosystem is even more challenging. Continue to leverage your peers here and others within the network. There's a really great community, I think, out here to really help support everyone as we're going through this challenge. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I would say start thinking long-term, stop thinking short-term. That's how you win. Back to the brand and the value. I would say think about how things were done before apps were a thing. TV, PR, those things were big, and I think there's still value there. So don't forget about our, print. There's impact there. There's a reason Apple still does all those things. And yeah, I think those would be the two takeaways I would leave you with.
Awesome. So just to summarize for all of you, be bold, be forward-looking, think about long-term, use your creatives wisely, and remember our shoes. Thank you. Thanks.